Hello friends, welcome back to Program with Akshay, and this is the continuation of our previous part. In the previous part, we have seen how to set up the CRUD operation, where we have seen to set up our CRUD operation. We have seen the get implementation and the post implementation. In the get implementation, we are returning a simple blank object or a blank string. And in the post implementation, where we are posting the data or we are doing a post operation where we are actually posting the daily task object, okay, where we are saving an ID or we are having a task, okay, like having a dinner or having a meal where we will post this object, okay, and by whom, like from me, okay. So these are the changes which we have done in the previous video. So do watch the previous video for this complete setup, okay. So right now what I can see, right now I can see something called as data.getTime. So it is not data, so it is date.getTime. So that is the first mistake. And I am passing an item. We don't have any item, so we will pass the daily task object here. So these are the couple of changes, and we will try to delete this commented code to speed to have a cleaner code or the cleaner page. And we are trying to hard code this hello world. So instead of hard code, we will try to pass this body, and we will try to return this send response, which will have a status code and a body. Now what we are going to do, we are going to create a method. We have already created a method called for get. Now for the same thing we are going to create for post, okay. So to create a method, we need to add a post, okay. Now to have a cleaner code or to have a cleaner integration, you can put this all thing like new API gateway dot lambda integration into the integration variable. We can say that const integration variable, okay, integration for CRUD operation, and you can pass this way just to have a cleaner approach or the cleaner code. Yes, and you can pass this variable here in get and post, okay. So these are the changes which we are going to do, and we will test this get and post operation, okay. And once this is successful, we will try to implement all the CRUD operations like get, all, delete and update, and get a particular daily task, okay. So let's try to deploy this application first. Let me try to save every changes, and I will do CDK deploy. And once the deployment is done, okay, we can see our changes in our API gateway, where we will see our methods. Right now it is having only get. Now we will see the post method, and we will try to post an object into the DynamoDB. And once we try to post an object, once it is successful, we will see those items into the DynamoDB. So let me pause the video for a minute here, and this will take a minute to deploy all the changes in my AWS account and to apply those CloudFormation stack set. So yeah, it is processing right now. So yes, my CDK deploy is done, and we do have an endpoint here. So let's try to test those endpoints, okay. And we will try to test those endpoints, and we will pass to do. And right now we are having an internal server error. So we will try to check the log why it is having an internal server error. So we will go to CloudWatch, or we will try to go to that API gateway, and inside that API gateway we have something called as task app, and let's try to debug it why we are facing this issue. So we already, you can see we have the post method which we already added in the stack, in our REST API stack. So that has been done, and let's try to check it, and let's try to test it, and we will try to test, and let's see the response here, and request response, and what we are trying to here, status 200, yes, input response error, content type and response body, reference error, cannot send response before, okay, cannot access send response before initialization, okay, runtime exports dot handler. So there is an issue with this send response, return send response 200 dot body. So it is not trying to access that. We have something called as response, okay. Let me check. So this is not reachable. we are having this close. Okay. Okay. So this should be here, semicolon, and this should be removed, and then we can able to access. Yeah, the send response is accessible now. Yes, believe. Yes, so. And let's try to deploy this. And we can see now, let's do yes, async. Yeah. And I guess, yeah, this is, yeah. Yeah, and this is yes. So this should be done. Let me save everything and let's try to do a CDK deploy. And once we try to do a CDK deploy, we will have the same endpoints. And let's try to navigate through our get method. And then we will try to post some object into our daily task DynamoDB. So let's wait for a minute here and we will see the actual deployment. We will have the actual deployment stack. So yeah, it is processing. Yeah, it is starting now. And yes, so creating cloud formations change set. Yeah, correct. And we should see our changes and we should see our endpoints. So yes, so these are the changes which we did. So the send response was not reachable and it was trying to get that. So that method. So that was the only change. Yes, and that's it. The endpoints are there. Now let's try to refresh those endpoints. Yes. Let's try to refresh here. Oh my, HTTPS. Still token authentication. Why is that so? Oh my god. To do, yeah. And we should see an empty response. I hope so. Yes, and we can see the empty response because we are returning an empty response. We don't have any implementation our list to do. Correct. Now what we are going to see, which we are going to see our post method. So let's try to check our post function. So let's try to navigate our post, and inside the post we will try to test it, and inside this we will try to pass some response body which is having tasks preparing CDK video, and by whom we this by Akshay. So yes, let's try to test this function. Hopefully, yes, it should execute and we are having the response body. We are returning the response body as ID and the status code 200. So let's try to navigate to our DynamoDB, and inside the DynamoDB, we have something called as tables. We already have been created our REST API stack, and let's try to explore the items and let's try to refresh and we can see our item here. Like the task is preparing CDK video by Akshay, and this is the ID which we are trying to insert. Okay, and this is the random ID as per the time. So we are able to save the data into our DynamoDB. Now we are going to see the rest of the operations like put, get, delete, and get a particular task. Okay, so let's move on to the next task. So our next step is we are going to get all the functions, okay, like get all the tasks from our application. So to do that, we have something called as async function list to do, which is having a blank where we are returning a blank string. So let's try to modify this, okay. And what we are going to do, we are going to declare a parameter first. So cons params, where we are going to pass our table name first. Yeah, where we are going to pass our table name, and inside the table name we have something called as my underscore table name. Correct. So this will take the table name from the DynamoDB and we are going to scan the entire table, and after scanning the entire table we are going to return a promise, and after returning the promise we will display all the tasks which we are there in the DynamoDB. Okay, so which will return what it is going to return a dynamo object where we are going to scan, where we are going to s is small scan, what we are going to scan params which will have a promise, Yes, it will have a promise. And then once it resolve, what we are resolving the data. Okay. And once it will resolve the data, it will return those items. Okay. It will return items. Yeah, that's about it. It will return items. Yes, that's about it. So in the list to do function where we are returning get all list of to do, we have declared params, and inside the params we have passed the table name. Okay, so we have declared the table name, and we are returning the DynamoDB object where we are scanning the entire table and returning all the objects. Okay, and we are calling this inside the switch root, which will return the get all list to do application, and which will call this method, and it will scan all the entire DynamoDB object. Okay, so let's try to save it, and we already have our main add method get path. Let's try to save it and let's try to deploy. Okay, let's try to deploy the application CDK deploy. You can do an hot swap also. So, okay, so hot swap is nothing but whatever the changes you have done in the current application or the current code changes in the TypeScript file, those will get deployed in the AWS account. Okay, AWS account console. So that is nothing but an hot swap is you're forcing those changes into your cloud formation template to apply those changes in your Lambda or in your DynamoDB. Okay, but in my case I have just a TypeScript change, so I will do a CDK deploy, and let's wait for a couple of minutes to do the actual deployment. Meanwhile, we will try to insert some value right now. If you can see, we have DynamoDB, and we are having, where is my DynamoDB? Yes, and inside the DynamoDB, I have only one item, I guess. Yes, we have only one item. So let's try to insert one more item. So we have tasks, night, and by Akshay 2. Okay, this will have a comma. Yes, and let's try to test it. And we are getting status as 200 and response body and the response headers. And if you see the status below down, yes, method completion completed with status 200, successfully completed execution. Now let's try to test. Let's try to check our, yes, so we have two items now, and let's see our deployment is being completed or not. Yeah, so the deployment bean is completed. Now let's try to check the endpoint. So copy this endpoint and paste it here, and hopefully we should get, no, it is throwing an error. So it should is not returning. Let's try to check our function first, and we have returning cons params and table name. We are passing the table name dynamo params, but it's returning a promise data. Oh, we are returning data dot items. I think so. That should be it. We are not returning, only we are returning items. Okay, so we should return data, whatever the data in, and inside the data, whatever the items are there inside our DynamoDB object. Okay, so let's try to wait again for a couple of minutes, and let's try to recheck our, yeah, it is already started deployment, creating CloudFormation chain set, and it should run, and rest everything remains same. Yes, and you can see we already are getting good night by this ID, and this is the first item and this is the second item. Okay, the more you add, the more you will get those items. Okay, so we have completed our get all items. Now we are going to see our delete and update, where we are going to create a method where we already had seen how to create a add method, like for the CRUD operation, how to integrate those with API gateway for get and post. Now we are going to do it for update and delete. So this is our next step for update and delete. So yes, let's move to the next step. So let's start our delete and update operation. Okay, so if you notice, we have something called as main path. Okay, where we are creating our API resource, and that is the root element, and we are adding the resource as to do. Okay, so our main path is to do. Okay, here in this case, so that is the parent path. Now what we are going to do, we are going to create a child path, which we are trying to attach to our parent. Okay, so our update, so for our delete, our path will be like to do slash whatever it might be, or delete id. Okay, in this case, like suppose your id is 1234, so our update or API will be like this: delete space to do. So this to do is our parent path and delete is our operation, our method, and id is the parameter which we are passing. So if you notice, to do is the parent and id is the child, okay, which we are passing for update and delete. Okay, so we are going to create a child path, and we are trying to attach to our parent path. Okay, so let's try to do it. So I will create a variable, say that's extend path, and which we are trying to attach to our main path. Okay, so we are trying to attach to our main path dot add resource to an id. Okay, so this id, we are going to change this in our runtime. Okay, so we are going to pass this id, and this id will obviously going to change when we are trying to put post or delete, or sorry, not put post, delete and update. Okay, so this will change as per the runtime. Okay, now we have created the extend path, so let's try to add this extend path and let's try to add the resources. Okay, so to add the resources, we are going to try to add extend path dot add method, and inside the add method we are going to create and delete, and we are going to pass our integration. So this is our integration object, and let's do it for update also, and this is for put, update put, and we are passing our integration. Yes, so we have created the extend path, and so the path will be delete to do slash id, and this extend path will pick up from the from the line number 40, where we have created our variable extend path, and we are trying to attach this resources to our main path. Okay, so yes, and we are trying to see by get by id also. So it by id, so extend path dot add method, and we are going to see get by particular to do, and let's pass our integration again. And yeah, so we have created delete, put, and get. Okay, so the next task is what we are going to do. We are going to create our, in our switch case, we are going to modify our case where we are trying to create for delete. Okay, for delete case. Okay, now what we are going to do, delete slash space slash tasks, or sorry, to do, and where we are going to pass an id, correct? And inside that, what we are going to do, we are going to pass a body, and inside the body we are going to pass a delete daily task, correct? We are going to create a method. Okay, now what parameter we are going to pass here? So if you notice, we have something called as event. Okay, we are returning an event, okay, inside the console log, and we are trying to extract the path, HTTP method, then route from those event object. Okay, so inside the event which we are going to pass in the inside the daily task, we have something called as event dot path parameters. We have something called as path parameters dot id. Okay, so we are going to pass path parameters dot id inside our delete, and let's try to break the statement. Why I am getting an error here? So I'm missing a double quote here. So yes, so we have created a case statement for delete where we are passing to our main path, our main root path, and we are passing our parent, our child path. Okay, then we are returning a body, and we are calling the delete daily task, and we are passing the parameters as event.pathParameters.id. Okay, and this event we are returning from our export handler, and we are trying to log it. Okay, so if you try to notice where we are getting this path parameters, so let's try to copy this path parameters, and let's try to go to CloudWatch. If you see, we have something called as CloudWatch, and inside the CloudWatch we have something called as log groups, and inside the log groups we have something called as, let's try to check for lambda. Oh, those CloudWatch, this is the lambda, and inside the lambda we have something called as REST API stack, and inside the REST API stack we have something called as monitor, and inside the monitor we have CloudWatch logs. I was checking at the wrong place. Maybe, yeah, this is the new app. Yeah, the REST API stack. Yeah. So this is the same thing itself. And yeah, this is the same thing. Yeah. If you see, it's still loading. And this is the latest one, I guess. No, this is not the latest one. We tried to insert something. Let's try to load it. Yeah, this is the latest one. Yeah, where we have inserted. Yeah, and that, yes, and this, if you see the event is triggered. We are trying to log this. Event is triggered. If you see, event is triggered, and inside this, let's try to search. We have something called as path parameters. I am seeing something. Yes, so right now we are trying to put, or we are trying to post an object. So inside the post object, like suppose you can see that we are trying to get, we have called the get method when we are trying to refresh the strings. Okay, and we have the accept body, and we have something called as multi headers, and we have something called as path parameters. Query string parameters is null, path parameters are null because we are trying to get all the values. And you can see the resource path is to do, HTTP method is get, and you have something identity and the domain name API ID, and the body is null. Okay, that is fine. We have something called as path parameters, and inside the path parameters we are going to pass the ID, which we are doing this. We are going to pass the ID, and after specifying the ID, like suppose 1 2 3 4, whatever the ID you are trying to delete, we will try to delete. Okay, so the next task is we are going to create a daily task, delete daily task function. So let's try to create it. So we will try to create an async function. Okay, async function delete task, and inside the delete task we are going to scan the entire object, and we are trying to delete those. Okay, so for this, let's try to create a variable first. Okay, cons params, and inside the cons params, again our traditional way where we are going to specify the table name, what we are going to delete it, and after that we are going to pass the key. That is, key is nothing but in our case is ID, correct? And inside the ID we are going to delete that particular ID from the our DynamoDB object. Okay, so here we are going to specify the key now. Okay, let me specify the key. So you can specify key. So we have something called as key. Yes, and inside the key I am going to specify ID and going to pass as ID. Correct. So this is the key we are specifying where we are trying to delete an object. Okay, so after this we are trying to return what we are trying to return, the DynamoDB object where we are trying to delete. Okay, where we are trying to delete our params, and which will have a promise again, promise, and where we are trying to resolve this promise. Yes, we are trying to resolve the promise and it will return the objects. Correct, which will return IM. Oh my god, my keyboard, what happened to my keyboard? Yes, so we are trying to return what we are trying to return, an ID. Correct. Yes, so let's try to test this method. Okay, so we have created a daily task function, and inside the daily task function we have specified the table name and we have specified the key what we are trying to delete it. So this key is nothing but our ID which we are trying to pass in our body. Okay, in our delete daily task function which we have created in our switch statement. Correct. So after specifying this we are trying to delete it, and inside the delete we are scanning the table, and inside the table we are returning a promise and we are returning an ID. Okay, so yeah, and here it should be ID, the key should be ID here. Yeah, and now it is perfect where we are calling this the function, yet we are trying to call this delete method inside our switch case and delete event parameter ID, and we are trying to call this function which has ID. And yes, and I think so we should try to test this, and let's try to deploy it again. And once we try to deploy it, we will test those method, the delete method, and inside the delete method we will pass the ID, this ID. If you say this ID, this is the ID we are going to pass, and we should have only one item in the DynamoDB. So let's wait. And yeah, yes, and it is trying to create a new method which we have imported here, add method delete. Now let's try to refresh our API gateway. Oh yeah, this was the API gateway. So this is our API gateway. And let's try to, yeah, we can see we already are having delete. Yeah. So I guess if deployment is completed, we can try to test it. Yeah, it is still going on, updating the CloudFormation stack. Yeah, and deployment is been done. Now let's try to test it, and to test it we are going to specify our parameter. Okay, so this is the path. So the path is, we are not going to specify any path because we are already have a to do path. We are going to specify the query string. Okay, so let's try to specify the query string, and this is the query string. Okay, this is the query string, and let's try to test it. And if you see, the method successfully is completed because not we are not returning anything. And let's try to refresh this. No, we are not able to delete it. I was putting on something else, and let's try to, I was putting it in the query string, and let's try to test it again. And the response body, you can see we are seeing the response body, the delete is 200. This is the ID, sorry, and we are getting the response as 200, and we should see the method completion. And yeah, we are seeing the only the one ID, that is the one item in the DynamoDB table. Let's cross check our DynamoDB table, and we should see only one item. Okay, Yes. So the item which we try to delete is being deleted from the DynamoDB, and our get all function is also working fine, which is trying to extract only one record from the DynamoDB. Okay. So the next task is we are going to update. Okay, so that is nothing but the put. Okay, where we are going to create a switch statement. Okay, for update or for put, and we are trying to create an async function just we have created for our daily task. We are again going to pass an id, and inside the id we are going to write it for update. Okay, for the DynamoDB scan we are going to create for update, just like for delete we are going to create for update. Okay, so let's try to move to another task. Let's try to move to other task for put. Okay, so for updating, or we have and delete. Yes, so let's try to copy paste the same function because we will try to use the same function, and let's try to put it here and say it is as update daily task, update daily task, and it will pass the id and the whole object. So let's pass the data. Okay, and the rest of the things remain same. The cons param, the table name where we have declared the environment variable, and the key which is taking from the parameter as id. Okay, now for this we have something called as syntax. Okay, where it is a bit weird for updating the values, something called as expression attribute and update. So in the expression attribute or expression attributes value, we have to exactly what attributes we have to pass. Okay, like we in this case our attribute value will be task and or by. Okay, and in update expression, just like in SQL syntax where we write the query for update, we have to set, okay, whatever there in the expression attribute. Okay, and then we have to return the values. Okay, so let's try to see those how to do that. Okay, so we have key, and inside the key we have something called as expression attribute values, and which will have your something called as tasks, correct, and which we're going to do from data dot tasks, correct, and we have something called as by, and which will take from data dot by. Okay, now you can pass the rest of the values. Okay, and you like updated by and updated time and so on and so forth. Okay, so these are the expression attribute values. Now we are going to set the update expression. Okay, to set the update expression we have something called as update expression, and inside the update expression we are now going to set the values. Okay, so set task is equal to task, like this, and inside that we have some task, and inside that we are going to set as task, correct, then comma, we have something called as by, yes, and yes, that's about it. And what we are going to return, we are going to have something return values saying that it is an updated new. Okay, updated underscore new. Okay, so yes, that's about it. So we are setting the values as task and by, and we are returning the values. The one thing which I have found out is this by is a reserved keyword in AWS. Okay, we cannot like for post, this by is a reserved keyword for the API gateway, so we have to modify that to something called as created by. Okay, so let's try to modify it, created by, and we have to delete the data in the DynamoDB table, so this stack will get recreated again. So Control C, we will try to remove it. Yes, here created by, something like that. Yes, created by, and yeah, that's about it. Let's try to save it, and yeah, where do we have our update is update daily task. Yes, where we are setting the task, and now we have to have calling the expression attribute values, and we have something called as update expression. So expression attribute values, where we are like defining defining the expression sets. Okay, so this sets are nothing but like we have something called as task and by, and we are updating the expression what we have to update. So we have to update tasks, yes, and created by. So here will be created by, and here also created by. Yeah. Now, so what we are going to do now, we are going to return. Okay, so we are going to return the values. Okay, so await DynamoDB dot update dot update. Okay, and we are going to return the params. We are going to return the params, yes, and again it will have a promise, yes, and then the result expression, where we are trying to return items updated. That's about it. And now we have updated our update daily task method, where we have set the expression attribute update expression. We are returning the values, and we are updating the params, that this whole params inside our DynamoDB object. Now let's try to update our switch case. Okay, so here I will copy the same case here, and let's try to put here, it will be put something to do, yes, and it will have an ID, that's correct. And here the body will have something called as update daily task, correct. And now we have the break functionality and the default. Okay, now inside the update daily task we are going to pass that ID. Okay, so our parameter value remains the same, event.path parameter.id, and we are going to pass data, yes. And yeah, so case put, yes, that is correct, and then the to do, and then ID. Yeah, and let's try to delete the data from the DynamoDB table first. I am in North Virginia, and let me move to AP South 1, and inside that we will try to delete the data inside the DynamoDB table first. So we have tables, and inside the tables we have the items. Now let's try to delete items. Yes, I wanted to delete it, and let's try to deploy our application. Let me save everything, yes, and I will just do a CDK deploy, or either CDK deploy hyphen hot swap. So let's wait for a couple of minutes, and this will, our put operation will get created, or put method will get created. Did I add? Yes, the put method will get created. So let's wait for a minute here. So our deployment is completed. Now let's move to API gateway, and let's try to post some values. So to post some values, we will go to here, and so we'll write some task having dinner, and we have now something called as created by Akshay. Yes, and let's try to test it. Yes, and let's try to push one more, Akshay 2, and let's try to push one more. Yes, now let's try to see whether we do have values or not. And let's try to move to DynamoDB, and we have DynamoDB. Go to tables, and inside the tables we have the table is created. Now let's try to explore, and yes, so the 2ID is being created. And why I cannot see created by? Why I cannot see created by? The ID is being created. Maybe I have missed somewhere. Not here. Created by function list, created ID task. Yes, content type. created by, okay, created by, it is like that's created by. Let's try to delete items, yes, and let's try to push it again. We have something called as created by, test it, yes, and it is successful. Now let's try to refresh, and yeah, we have something called as created by. Let's try to push one more item by Akshay having lunch, and here is Akshay having dinner, yes, and let's try to test, and we should see our both items. Yes, and we have both items. Now let's try to check our get, and you can see now we will try to update an ID. Okay, so this is our ID having lunch, and we will try to update the ID. So go to API gateway, and we have something called as put, and inside put we will try to put our ID as this, and inside the request body, which we have specified the data here. So if you see our method, we are passing our ID, yes, and data is nothing but our whole object. So in the request body we are passing like task, and we will say cleaning car, and now we will see created by demo. Okay, so let's try to test it, and yes, no data, yes, that's correct, and it is returning a status as 200. Let's try to refresh the list. No, it is not updated, something is wrong. Let's try to check it again, where we have data screening car, and we have something called as yes, put yes 200. I am getting an any error. No, it is not throwing any error. Okay, so the issue was why it is not getting updated. If you see the CloudWatch logs, it is saying dynamo.update promise is not a function. Okay, now if you try to go here, and you can see the promise spelling is wrong, so silly mistake. Let's try to deploy it again, and I hopefully it should work now. So these are things when you try to debug it, you can see those events in CloudWatch. Okay, where I have for this particular Lambda, we have something called as monitor tab, and inside the monitor tab, we have something called as CloudWatch logs. And inside the CloudWatch logs, you can see the error because we are trying to log the event inside the CloudWatch logs. If you see here, we are trying to log the event. Yes, and whatever the like if any method is not being supported or any route is not being supported, it will throw an error in CloudWatch logs. Okay, so let's try to wait for a couple of seconds, and yes, it is deploying and it is updating the CloudFormation stack. Yes, it is updating. Yes, yeah, so our update is done, and let's try to refresh now, and we have two items. Yes, having lunch, having dinner, and this is the ID. Now, hopefully it should work, and I will try to copy paste this ID, and having chocolate and created by demo test. Yes, and let's try to refresh it, and yes, yes, created by demo, which we have passed in our request body, and task is having chocolate. Yes, and yeah, that's about it. So our update is done. Now what we are going to do, we are going to see get a particular task. Okay, get a particular task by ID. Okay, so we will try to create a function similarly for we have created for delete. Similarly, will try to create a function for how to get a particular task. So let's move on to the next task. Now let's try to get a particular task. So to get a particular task, we will copy paste this delete task, and we will try to put it here, and get delete task by ID, and we are going to pass an ID. The parameters will remain same, and instead of delete we are going to get params, promise, and here we are going to receive an item or return an item, and inside promise we are going to pass an item, and we are iterating, or we are going to take only one item. So from the item list we are going to get only one item, which is we are going to pass in the parameter by id. Okay, and now we are going to change our switch statement. So let's try to copy this and paste it, and here we are going to get, and here get, instead of this, get to by id, and here our function name, and the function name is get daily tasks by id. And yeah, we are in the parameter we are going to pass event.path parameter.id, and we are going to remove the data. We are not going to pass the data, so only in parameter we are going to pass the id. And yeah, that's about it. And here we are already creating our method, yeah, get. So let's try to deploy it again, and let's check after deployment whether we are able to get a particular id or not. So let's wait for a minute, and after the deployment we will have an endpoint. And we will try to get this particular id. Okay, so let's wait for a minute here. Yes, our deployment is completed, and let's try to refresh it. Yes, we are seeing that those three items. Now let's try to copy paste this, and let's try to paste it. We should get only one item. Yes, and we are able to get only one item, demo having chocolate and created by Akshay too, and this is the id. So yes, we are successfully completed our CRUD operation with the DynamoDB, and with the help of REST API gateway, we are able to successfully complete our get, put, post, and delete, and get a particular ID. So we are able to achieve all the demos with this help of AWS CDK Masterclass. So stay tuned for upcoming lectures where we are going to talk about how to create an S3 bucket with the help of AWS CDK, and how to set up event notification, how we can generate a thumbnail with the help of AWS CDK. So stay tuned, happy learning, and share the content if you found the content is useful. Thank you. Bye bye. Take care.